everybody, it's me, Whitney, here for another video for my booktube channel, All the Shelves. Today I'm going to be talking about my 10 favorite nonfiction books of 2015. I'm going to move through these books fairly quickly. I think that the best part about reading nonfiction is the discovery process, and so I'll just give you a little bit of information about the content and the style and move on. So here we go. My 10th favorite nonfiction book of 2015 was Scratchmo, My Life in New Orleans by Louis Armstrong. I was presenting at a conference in New Orleans earlier in 2015, and so I read a whole bunch of books about New Orleans to kind of get me ready for the experience. I like to go to a new city knowing some of the sights and some of the bookish things around town that I want to see, and one of the things that I read was Louis Armstrong's memoirs from his early life in New Orleans. It was really great. He's not the greatest writer. He's the greatest jazz musician. He's not the greatest memoir writer, but you got such a sense for the city and the history of the city and the history of jazz through one person's perspective, and it was very uplifting book, even though he was doing like pretty crazy things in New Orleans. But it was really exciting to hear about how this young person, completely disadvantaged, was able to rise above that and how he brought attention to his city. So I really liked Scratchmo, My Life in New Orleans by Louis Armstrong. My 9th favorite nonfiction book of the year was The Secret History of Wonder Woman by Jill Lepore. Since I'm doing my dissertation on superheroes, I read, I would say, all of the superhero criticism that I am aware of. And out of everything that I've read about Wonder Woman, this really is the best thing that I've come across. It's not necessarily analytical, she doesn't do close readings of the text, but she gives an extensive history of the character and the creator William Marston's life, which was insane. I don't really want to give anything away because I just want people to know about this guy. He was weird. He was so wacky. And you might not agree that Wonder Woman is the greatest feminist character in comic books, but she certainly began with those kinds of intentions, and this book was fascinating. My number 8 favorite was Packing for Mars by Mary Roach. I actually listened to a couple Mary Roach books on audiobook this year. I listened to Stiff and this one, and I preferred this one. I thought that all of these questions that I've had about astronauts that I didn't even know that I had were answered, and I was way more interested in how astronauts poop and how they shower and how much they sweat and all of that gross stuff than the math or the science behind getting to Mars. So this book like satisfied all of my questions and my curiosities about space travel. I guess I'm not that curious about space travel, but I am very curious in the personal habits of astronauts, and that's all in here. My number 7 favorite of the year was Hunger Makes Me a Modern Girl by Carrie Brownstein. I listened to this on audio too, and I actually talked about this in my very first booktube video. I am not that interested in Sleater-Kinney as a band. I wasn't at least going into it. They're not necessarily my style of music, but I was really interested in 90s punk rock scenes and the Riot Grrrl movement, and just Carrie Brownstein as a person. She seems really smart and funny, and I wanted to know more about her. This book was really, really good. It was smart and it was elegant and it was crafted really well, especially for a musician's memoir. I just haven't really read a whole lot of those that I've loved, and I really loved this one. My number 6 favorite nonfiction book of 2015 was called Mission High by Christina Rizga. I don't know her as a writer, but I picked up this book on a whim. It was just on display at the library, and I ended up being like totally enthralled by it. It's about this high school in San Francisco that, even though they get some of the worst test scores in the city and even in the country, and they're under threat of being shut down, under No Child Left Behind stuff all the time, they actually have one of the best graduation rates, and they also have like a huge college acceptance rate. Like, they're an excellent school, but they fail at all these standardized tests. So she goes through and follows, I think it's like 4 different students and maybe 4 or 5 different teachers of different subjects, and she tries to figure out what it is that this school is doing that is so successful. And it turns out the stuff that they're doing is completely different than the stuff that the government tries to require of high schools. So I'm interested in pedagogy, and I kind of think sometimes about going into public education, and so I was already predisposed to like this, but I think that anybody would really be interested in this book, especially if you know of kids, or you have kids that are going to high school, or you are trying to choose what kind of high school to put your kids into. It seems like a really important book to read. My number 5 favorite was So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. I've read now, I think, everything that Jon Ronson has written, and he always writes about stuff that I am just really, really interested in, so I picked this up, I think, like right away. And I haven't stopped thinking about it since. I think that it is condemning of every person that is online. Everybody online has said something negative in some way, or at least had like really judgmental thoughts about people online and assume that they know people just because their picture went viral. And this book was really important for me to read. I think it gave me a better outlook on what people are like, even when they seem like horrible people, like you don't know everything about them, right? And especially in digital culture, you really don't know anything about those people. So this is probably my favorite Jon Ronson that I've read, actually, although he has a piece on ICP, Insane Clown Posse, the like, what do you call them, like rap clown group, scary clown group. He has an essay on them that is just like the funniest essay I've ever read. It was so funny. I was dying laughing. This one is not quite as funny, although it's still humorous. So that was, once again, So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. My 4th favorite nonfiction book of the year was Missoula by Jon Krakauer. The subtitle is Rape in the Justice System in a College Town. I was infuriated listening to this book. I listened to this one on audio too, actually, while I was running around town, and sometimes I would have to stop and catch my breath, not necessarily because I was running too hard, but because I was just so mad. I was so mad at the justice system and sports. This is about student athletes who get away with rape, basically. I was so mad at college departments, and that's something that hits me really close to home. Campus sexual assault is like a rampant problem on every campus. So if you're looking for a book that just infuriates you and gets your blood boiling, this is a good one. As a result, it is really interesting to listen to and read. It's like you can't put it down, but you're so mad that you have to keep listening to it. My 3rd favorite nonfiction book of the year I actually own. It's On Writing by Stephen King. I've owned this thing forever. I've read excerpts in classes before. I think like a creative writing class in high school used this, and I never really got around to it. Once I own books, sometimes I'm like, oh, now I have forever to get to it, so I'll read my library books first. But I finally read this, and as expected, I totally loved it. I read my fair share of Stephen King. I don't really keep up with his new novels anymore, but when I was in elementary school and junior high, I think I read everything that I could possibly get my hands on. I learned about the world through Stephen King, which is maybe like a pretty messed up way of learning about the world, but there you have it. This book, though, gives us a personal side to Stephen King that I really appreciated. There was a moment in this book, and I'm not going to spoil anything because you know that Carrie was a big bestseller and made him a bunch of money, and it was also his first book, so sorry if you feel like that's a spoiler. It's not. He gets the phone call that tells him that Carrie's going to be published and what kind of advance he's getting on Carrie, and he had been working his whole life trying to become a writer, and he never gave up that goal, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it right now. It's so nice. That moment is so nice that he picks up the phone and they tell him, like, you're gonna be a writer, all of your dreams are coming true, you know, congratulations, welcome to the world of success. I just think that that is an amazing moment, and the way that he writes about it, and I'm getting a little choked up about it now. I really loved it, and by the end of this book I was totally on his side. I don't care if he's a schlocky writer sometimes, or if he writes these silly books, you know, it's just horror or whatever. I am like on board with Stephen King as both a writer and a person now. My number 2 favorite was My Life in France by Julia Child. I also listened to this on audiobook. I really love listening to memoirs and nonfiction on audiobook. It's just about Julia Child's life in France, why she decided to become a chef, what kind of things were inspiring her there, what her social life was like there, and what especially her marriage was like. It's just a really nice read. You always feel so happy for her success. She has a great attitude. Even her failures she approaches with humor, and I just really enjoyed the experience of listening to her talk about her life. I didn't know much about Julia Child, and I hadn't even watched one of her shows all the way through. After I read this, I went and watched a bunch of them on YouTube, but she's just like a great lady. I really wish I would have known her. So that is My Life in France by Julia Child, my number 2 pick. And my number 1 favorite nonfiction book of 2015 was The Empathy Exams by Leslie Jamison. This is actually a collection of essays, and each essay she's trying to unpack what it means to be empathetic to each other. So the first essay, which really just immediately grabbed my attention, was about her being an actor at a medical school, pretending to have all these symptoms and kind of judging whether the doctor was able to be empathetic towards her, his bedside manner, and how she could gain empathy by reenacting these symptoms. One of the essays that really struck me was about a group of people who have this disorder, or they feel like they have this disorder, but the medical community completely denies that the disorder is real. They're just, you know, it's in your head, it's psychosomatic, don't worry about it. So all these group of people have found a community online where they can find empathy with each other, and they meet at conventions and they talk about these symptoms that they have. I have been known to be pretty cynical about psychosomatic disorders. I guess I'm just thinking of hypochondriacs that I know, and that makes me feel terrible after reading this essay. She does a really good job of convincing me that even if it's not real in a physical sense, that doesn't mean it's not real. The other essay that I really liked was she was talking about a long distance marathoner. I run a lot, and so I felt like that one was like right up my alley. She talks about how these people run these ultra marathons and what it takes to run an ultra marathon, and she goes to one of the events and sees how it goes. I really liked reading this book. It was very erudite, very intense. I feel like I grew not just as a person, but also as a thinker. She really challenged me in a lot of ways. So I will be looking for everything that Leslie Jamison writes in the future. So that is my top 10 favorite nonfiction books of 2015. I think that's it for me as far as list making for 2015. I'm gonna get started on reading the 2016 books now. So my next video will probably be a mid-month wrap up of what I've been reading in January. If you've read any of these nonfiction books, and I suspect that some of you have, I would love to talk with you about it in the comments section. Thank you so much for leaving comments on some of my videos already. This has been a great experience so far. I am really excited to keep making videos, so I will see you all later.